Thank you very much, Dr. Corley. Dr. Corbett.
Yes, good afternoon, Chairman Bollert and members of the House Committee on Science. I want to thank you for inviting me to speak on the topic of the World Trade Center disaster investigation. This is an issue of significant national importance, and I speak for many who understand this importance. I'd like to discuss three issues with you today: an analysis of the current building performance assessment study of the World Trade Center collapse, a proposal for an enhanced national disaster investigation response protocol for future disasters, and a recommendation for a commission on the World Trade Center disaster. In the wake of the loss of the World Trade Center, many questions began to arise as to the cause of the collapse of the Twin Towers. What were the specific causal factors of the collapse, and what was the exact sequence of events that led to the collapse? These are important questions that impact national security. We're a nation at risk. There are many high-rise buildings and structures across the country, and many more on the way, and we need to learn from the events of 9/11 and apply these lessons. As engineers, architects, builders, as firefighters, and as citizens who occupy high-rises, and as those who are in a position to protect those citizens, there are critical questions regarding this collapse, and they need answering. We need to extract all of the lessons for future generations who will live and work in high-rise buildings. The building performance assessment currently being conducted of the collapse is just that, an assessment, not an investigation, in my opinion. While the Building Performance Assessment Team is composed of an elite group of engineers and scientists, the standard procedures used by the BPAT team have proven to be inadequate. Hailing the collapse study as an assessment rather than as an investigation has allowed valuable evidence in the form of the tower's structural steel to be destroyed. It is a steel that holds the primary key to understanding the chronology of the events resulting in the collapse. Without an official investigative presence, the FEMA-sanctioned assessment team did not have the authority to ensure that all the structural steel was thoroughly examined and the crucial steel from the points of impact were saved for examination. It is my understanding that only a handful of pieces of the steel from the points of impact have been secured to date. In addition, the BPAT team studying the collapse has apparently been hampered in accessing building construction documents. These problems will have an impact on the BPAT report that is due to be released in April. The lack of significant amounts of steel for examination will make it difficult, if not impossible, to make a definitive statement as to the cause and chronology of the collapse. The collapse of the World Trade Center the World Trade Center towers were the largest structural collapses in world history. A disaster of such epic proportions demanded that we would fully resource a comprehensive, detailed investigation. Instead, we are staffing the BPAT with part-time engineers and scientists on a shoestring budget. The current World Trade Center disaster inquiry has exposed a gaping hole in the way that we investigate disasters. We don't have a comprehensive plan for disaster investigations except for plane crashes, and we don't apply the necessary resources for a complete and thorough investigation. We need to have an enhanced disaster investigation response protocol that provides for a systematic, multidisciplinary, and scientifically rigorous approach. We need to bring in the experts in an organized and rapid manner to extract all the lessons from the disaster. Finally, we need to make sure that the lessons are actually applied. I would recommend that a task force be impaneled to develop an enhanced disaster investigation protocol. Given FEMA's role in disaster response and their critical disaster mitigation responsibilities, I would recommend that this task force be initiated within their organization. With regard to the World Trade Center disaster, there are several other additional areas that need to be investigated and studied. Specifically, there are 5 additional focus areas that are of concern: an analysis of the building design itself, the firefighting operations, the building evacuations, the search and rescue operations, and the relationship between the disaster and our building and fire codes. In order to gather all the lessons, we must analyze the disaster as a whole. Studying them as individual items eliminates the critical process of information sharing and understanding the interrelationships between these different focus areas. We need to bring all 6 of these focus areas together as a collective group under one roof, so to speak. Studying the disaster as a whole will also ensure coordination, avoid duplication, and verify that all areas of concern are being covered. I would recommend that a commission on the World Trade Center disaster be immediately organized to initiate a comprehensive investigation and to coordinate the existing public and private research projects that are already underway. For an example, an ad hoc committee entitled the World Trade Center Evacuation Study Initiative has been meeting for several months to study the issues of the building evacuations. Study groups like these need to be brought together. A variety of important lessons will come from the World Trade Center disaster that will apply to our current national building codes. For example, our current requirements in high-rise structures treat a 15-story building the same as we treat a 100-story building. In fact, from a firefighting perspective, a 15-story building is completely different than a 100-story building, as we well know. Another example is that the test that we utilize to establish the fire resistance of beams and columns, steel columns. The test was first developed in the 1920s, and yet we're still using the same test with the same 1920s fires in the year 2002. We need to address and correct these kinds of deficiencies. We can learn many lessons from the disaster at the World Trade Center. In fact, we must learn these lessons. The lessons will form better building codes, improve building design methodologies, improved emergency procedures, and enhanced protection against terrorist attacks. We must assure that these lessons are actually applied, increasing the level of safety and security for all of our citizens. I thank you, Chairman Bollert, and the honorable members of the Committee on Science for giving me this important opportunity to share my thoughts with you. I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have. And
Thank you very much, Dr. Corbett. Dr. Astani.